All right, everyone, welcome back. This is Lecture 20, Part 2. Still talking about games and culture in the 128-bit era. This is roughly the period of 1999 to 2005. And we're going to talk today about sexuality and relationships in games. So, as this era got bigger, or excuse me, as this era went on and gaming became much more mainstream, several games in this era began to include elements of relationships or presentations of sexuality into their gameplay or into their stories or narrative. And this wasn't brand new. There had been examples of both presentations of sexuality and relationships in games prior to this era. But in this era, it started to become more common or at least more um, open, I should say. So games also began to portray various aspects of sexuality, including same-sex relationships, even if it's only in a limited fashion in this era. There we go. So the first game we'll talk about is Dead or Alive Extreme Beach Volleyball. We'll take a look at this on the stream on Tuesday. This one is sort of the most obvious, like in-your-face um, presentation of sexuality. It comes out for Xbox in 2003. It's one of their best-selling games. It was a greatest hits title. According to the producer of this game, is say quote unquote sports fantasy. It's essentially a sort of sandbox style game. You can do things like you can play volleyball, of course. You can shopping. You can dress up the characters in various outfits and accessories. You can give gifts. Characters have relationship meters that you can build up by exchanging gifts or playing volleyball with them or whatnot. Um, some of the things about this are the fact that it features only the female characters from the Dead or Alive fighting series. They have male characters, but they're just completely absent from this game. As we'll see in the stream, this game has a very sort of objectifying view. You can move the camera around to sort of ogle the virtual ladies in a way that's um, very sexualized. Um, the it's a very sort of traditional portrayal of almost like a virtual Sports Illustrated swimsuit issue or a Maxim magazine or sort of aimed at sort of a it's not doesn't have explicit nudity, but it's very close and it's implied. Um, we'll watch the intro to this on the stream, and you guys will see it's kind of a little bit over the top. But this was one of the very first games that sold itself on just being sexy. Like this was very much designed to appeal to young men, and the appeal of the game is yes, you could play volleyball, but and you could dress these female characters up in very scanty bikinis and stuff, um, and you can actually swing the camera out and you'll see it's a very I don't know, almost sort of like how would I describe this? It's easier when you see the demo to kind of get a feel for what they're going for, and it's a very much a sort of a male fantasy kind of presentation of the material. But we'll take a good look at that on Tuesday, so you can sort of see how that gets rolling. And that's Dead or Alive Extreme Beach Volleyball. This is the game that we talked about when we did the ratings analysis in Assignment 4, and then in Europe this was PEGI 12 game, and in the United States this was a TV or mature game, rated M for mature. So again, that you've seen the trailer for it. So we'll take a look at this in more detail on Tuesday. Fable came out from Microsoft on the Xbox. The main character could pursue relationships with both sexes. This wasn't a major part of the game. It was really just sort of there to say, I think it was like almost a checkbox feature. You could pursue relationships with both sexes, but it would give a slight preference to heterosexual relationships in the first one. In the Fable 2 and the sequel, it gave equal preference either way. But again, this was just sort of a modeling of you could sort of woo people by giving them gifts and things like that. Um, it really was just sort of a checking the box sort of thing in terms of overall gameplay, but it was there. So you start to see this ability to represent romantic relationships in in games, particularly games that have a narrative sort of basis, right? A story game. Bully is also from our good friends at Rockstar Games. It's sort of like Grand Theft Auto Jr. if you've never played it. It has the same sandbox style gameplay, except that it's in a private school setting. Um, he has the main character, whose name escaped me, engages in various hijinks. We might look at this in the stream on Tuesday if we have time. The main character can pursue relationships with both male and female schoolmates. And again, this is very similar to what we just talked about in Fable. I think he gives them gifts, and if they like him enough, they'll make out with them with their clothes on, as you can sort of see in the image here. This game was rated T for teen by the ESRB because the characters don't do anything more than sort of, hug and kiss and make out. I mean, I guess that's as graphic as it gets. So the ESRB was like, "Yep, that's teen." Jack Thompson, who we talked about in part one, who's the big critique of sexuality and violence in media, really kind of laid into the ESRB about this because he couldn't believe that a game that illustrated any kind of homosexual content would be rated T. And the ESRB responded by saying, "Yeah, we saw that and it's rated T." So um, that's just again another example. And again, this isn't a primary mechanic in the game. You don't have to mess with this to get through the game at all. It's just sort of there. But again, starting to see this idea of representing adult relationships, or in this case, teen relationships, in games that are heavily story based. The Bioware RPGs of this era really do take this relationship thing to the next level. They don't really represent sexuality in any way, but these role playing games included both relationship mechanics and homosexual and heterosexual relationship options. So this is your Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic 1 and 2 and Jade Republic for Xbox. You see this in later Bioware games, particularly Dragon Age, the Dragon Age series, and the Mass Effect series. So in these games, the main character often has a series of dialogue choices with various characters, and some of them can open up relationship possibilities where those persons become your significant other, or by sort of really engaging with these, finding out characters' backstories, opened up new options where in the Star Wars games they could become Jedi if you got a character, went through a character's dialogue trees enough and in the right path. So it was sort of a modeling of relationships, right? Communication between characters that furthers the plot and opens up new options gameplay wise. So, again, in all of these games, much like the ones we've talked about previously, the sexuality and relationships are part of the game, but they're not required to play the game or to finish the game in any way. They're just there if you want to explore them. So again, BioWare really heavily invested in this side of the game design, and it really shown. And you see it in Dragon Age and Mass Effect in particular. These are earlier examples of it, so it's not quite as developed, but it's still there, and it's pretty good actually. Particularly Knights of the Old Republic 1 and Jade Republic, I feel like have pretty interesting relationship mechanics. So again, just to give you an overview of this era, these things are starting to appear. They're not in every game. They're not the things that people talk about with gaming. But the fact that gamers are now adults, even if they're young adults, is starting to influence what kinds of things are available in games. And this kind of gets to the question of, why don't games have more genres, right? Why aren't there romantic comedy games or games that are heavily relationship based? And they do exist, but they're not generally part of the mainstream of gaming. But you're starting to see the inklings of it here, as well as representations of sexuality. And so that's going to start here in the 128-bit era and then extend out throughout gaming in a bunch of different ways moving forward. So that's it for lecture 20. This is a relatively short lecture because normally we'd watch a lot of videos and do a lot of demos, but I'll have a video playlist for you on YouTube that I'll send out in the announcement with the links to the lecture, and we'll demo some of this stuff on Tuesday. So I hope you all enjoyed it. Take care of yourselves, and I'll see some of you on the stream on Tuesday. Thank you.